It's the big one. Canada, USA, round two, winner takes all for the Four Nations crown. Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most importantly, and above all else, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we are talking about what's about to drop in a few hours. It is the big one. Canada, USA, round two. Probably one of the most hyped hockey games that we've seen since at least Saturday. Joking aside, I can't remember a game that has more anticipation, more drama, more energy, more hatred, and more intensity in, forever. The last game that I think could even come to this level of intensity is probably, the Vancouver Olympics. You just don't see a game that is this hyped, let alone, really having the eyes of much of North America on it. The circumstances, I think, have really put this game in a spotlight that not many individual one-off moments in the NHL season or even in international hockey on a routine basis can really quite recreate. This is a lightning in the bottle moment, and I think the NHL is very cognizant of that. All the media, all of the hype, all the social media postings, it has been at an elevated level that I can't even begin to recall from any previous tournament. The amount of people talking smack back and forth, everyone getting into arguments. This feels like something more than just a tournament game. It really feels like a defining moment between these two nations, which is really funny because it is just a hockey game. And yet, given all the circumstances, it just has taken on a new significance and emotional intensity that I don't think, the NHL ever anticipated. They just looked at this break here where the NBA is not really in session. The MLB hasn't started back up. The NFL's done with for now. So here was a good weekend in February to make something happen for about 2 weeks of a tournament. And they unintentionally created one of the most watched and most intense hockey series of all time. So, the game that's coming up in a few hours has more hype than you could possibly imagine. Emotions are running high. The energy is palpable. The fans are going to be absolutely ballistic. Personally, I couldn't be more excited for this game, but I also think that the way that the game's going to play out is going to be very different than the first game. Game one, I think, emotions were so intense. Everyone basically wanted to scrap and set an early tone. And I think this game is going to be more mature, more controlled, but still very intense. I expect tons of big hits. I wouldn't be shocked if there are very borderline hits. There's just so much riding on this game somehow, and it's really funny because technically there's no real prize or true award that counts for some sort of major record or standings thing, right? This is a tournament set up by the NHL. It's not like an IIHF kind of event. It's not the Olympics. It's sort of its own standalone thing, and yet it feels like it bears the significance of all of those tournaments, and in some ways is even weightier just because of all of the context around it, and I think that makes for, quite frankly, primetime must-see appointment viewing. This game has more anticipation than I can recall for a hockey game, probably for most of my life. If you're Canadian, obviously, Vancouver was probably one of the most heralded moments that you've been around for. But, for an American at least, we don't really get many moments like this. You have like the women's team winning gold a couple of years ago. That was tremendous. And I think that was, probably one of the biggest accomplishments from our side of things. But, a lot of people probably weren't watching that game. It was at a very late hour. And, it's one of those scenarios where it was a tournament that I don't think people were as focused on, which is a shame because it was a fantastic game. And, for the U.S. women's program, a huge accomplishment, once again, securing a major medal. But I think this game doesn't even need those stakes. It has entirely different ones to the point where if you go out on the street in the U.S., people who don't even watch hockey are talking about it. That is how much this has gotten around, how much it's grown. We've seen politicians make comments about it, major celebrities and figures who don't talk about hockey post about it on social media. It's been absolutely insane. If you're Canadian, this is in your blood, so you're just used to it. But for Americans, I think this is a pretty novel and new experience. And it's not like the Team USA men's program has been good all that recently. This is like the first time in many years where the US program legitimately has something to rival Canada, although it's still not there. Obviously, you guys have certain levels of talent that the U.S. just doesn't quite match, but maybe that doesn't matter in other categories and capacities, because the one that the U.S. does beat Canada in just happens to be the guy making all the saves. So this game, super excited. A lot of drama. There's also been a lot of confusion as to who exactly is going to be suiting up for Team USA. Not because it's been hard to predict. I mean, most of the roster is pretty similar, but there have been some changes. Charlie McAvoy is going to be out. In his place, there was a chance that Quinn Hughes might have suited up. There were reports that he was coming to camp, coming out of Vancouver. That didn't really happen. He's still in Vancouver. He was injured coming into this tournament, so I was really shocked that they were going to try and force him in. I think he was just more of an injury reserve thing, because you technically have to have less than 18 skaters before you can sub in somebody on an emergency recall. So I didn't really expect to see him, but I also was kind of thinking, if he did report, you would probably hear about somebody mysteriously getting sick or having some nagging injury that would keep them out of this game. And, I wouldn't have been shocked if it would have been Jake Sanderson, who's currently scheduled to take the lineup. So a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. I think Brett Pesce has maybe been discussed as coming in. Clayton Keller, there was a joke about him from a fake Frank Saravalli tweet. I don't know if that was actually anything based off of like a reality, but whoever it is, there just seems to be some confusion. Of the lineup, I think Brady Tkachuk is the only one who's actually somewhat of a doubt. Pretty much everyone expects to be in up front. Your Matthews, the Tkachuks, Eichel, Larkin, and Connor, of course. Pretty much all the guys that have been playing this tournament so far are expected to go. It's really only on the defense where there's been a significant change. For Team Canada, they are basically going with the same lineup that they had pretty recently. Point, McDavid, and Stone up front. Crosby, McKinnon, and Reinhart, unless they change something, in tomorrow's practice skates. I don't really expect there to be too much of a change. Even if there is, it's probably a configuration that they've at least used before. In the bottom six, you've got Hagel, Cirelli, and Marner, and then Marchand, Bennett, and Konechny. On defense, same as it's been for the most part. Taves and Makar, Morrissey and Parayko, and Sanheim and Doughty. Would have probably liked to see Harley at some point. He had a really good game that he came in, and I'm a little surprised that he got benched, but it is what it is. Maybe they're hoping the veteran experience that Sanheim has is going to be enough to make the difference. I couldn't tell you. But all I know is that Theodore's loss has definitely been pretty noticeable, and while it wasn't maybe noticeable in some of the other games that didn't involve the U.S., I think it's going to be a little bit of a problem here in this upcoming one. It was definitely noticeable in the first game between these two teams. In net, also kind of a concern for Canada. The U.S. has Hellebuck, who basically subs for the difference that, Canada's offense can create, right? The Canadian offense is just flat out better than what the U.S. has, but the U.S. has the best goalie, and that kind of has made a huge difference. Second game, I don't know if that's going to be the case. Bennington's going to have to be at his best, and I think that that's, always the case, but especially now. I just kind of wonder, the Canadians are going to be pissed off about the first game. They're going to want to make a point. I really do see them coming out of this one like 4-2 on the winning ledger. I just think that the stuff that was maybe a little unfortunate or didn't quite happen in the first game, it's not going to play out the same way in game 2. But curious to know your score predictions. Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a moment, we're going to step aside from the tournament. Obviously, it's going to be super hyped. Friday's episode will probably try and recap what we saw. I'm sure the emotions are going to be running super high, so should be a really fun episode. But in the meantime, there have been some intriguing-ish trade rumors, I guess. One in particular that I think a lot of Jets fans are starting to latch onto. I want to chat about why I'm a little less enthused about it in just a brief moment. But before we go too much further, thought you should hear about our friends and partners at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. They're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. For somebody who likes to go to the gym, having a good protein snack is always convenient, something that you can pop without too much of the worry about the calories, very harmful fats. It's a great option. And, with pistachios, you can either get them with or without shells. Personally, I kind of like the shells. It's just a little bit more tactile, a little more fun. Feels like you're cracking into something. And as a Marylander, we love crabs. So it's kind of like cracking open a crab, except it's a nut. And you know what? It comes with a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. And it's super convenient. You just grab a pack and go. So if you're wanting to get in on the action and get a great protein punch, get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about a particular trade rumor that has popped up recently. I'm seeing a lot of Jets fans on social media talking about it. And look, that doesn't really mean that there's anything here. This is just fans talking back and forth about what they want to see the Jets do. And that's fine. That's what I do on this podcast. But just to preface this, this is not a certified rumor. But the Jets do have folks from the Hawks org. And so the idea of a Seth Jones trade is actually not nearly as far-fetched as you might think. Jones has been playing top pair for Chicago for the past couple of seasons. And, it's very complicated with him. He's signed to a huge contract. He's eating first pair minutes. And you look at some of the underlying metrics and stats for him, he doesn't seem that bad. His reputation of being a one-note sort of offensive blue liner with almost no defensive presence has really haunted him for many years. And I still think to some degree that is true about his game. It's just that he's doing a lot in transition and some other stuff to help the Hawks as much as he can. And so you look at a lot of the microstats tracking and it looks pretty positive. The thing with the Seth Jones trade is you're going to have the Hawks eat salary. There's just no real way around it. One of the first biggest problems that I have with him is that he costs $9.5 million per season for like another 6 years. We're talking about a first pairing right-handed D who's aged 30 and has another 6 years left on this contract. If he was younger and maybe, in a different state of his career, I'd have thought more about it. But at $9.5 million, man, you basically have to be like mini Erik Karlsson at that price, because Karlsson's making $10 million. Yes, they're at very different stages of their careers, and there were many other circumstances around Karlsson's last extension. But I'm just saying, comparatively speaking, if you're looking at a big name asset who's potentially actually on the trade market, especially for a team like the Jets, Karlsson could be a guy that you go after, and he's a lot less in term. Will he cost less in assets? I have no clue. I would imagine no, because he's only got a couple of years left. And if the Pens eat any of his salary, which I'm not sure if they actually have the retention slots to do that, I just, I don't really see a scenario where, for me, the value for trying to bring in Jones makes sense. I could see, Chicago trying to move him either at a reduced cap hit or they basically pay somebody to take on his salary, which I don't want that to be the Jets. If he was maybe 4 to 5 years left at $6.5 million, I could be slightly convinced into accepting it. But I just don't think it's a move that the Jets really should be heavily invested in. I don't know that his numbers look atrocious, especially in comparison to a lot of the other Blackhawks defenders, but it's not at a level where I'm looking at his results and I'm thinking, this guy is screaming top pair. Alongside Morrissey or Sandberg, yes, he will absolutely be an upgrade in some capacities, especially offensively. The worry that I have is, say, the old version of him from Columbus or from his early Chicago days shows up, and that's the version that you get. you are stuck with that for a very long time. That salary is basically not movable. Yes, the cap's going up. Yes, the percentage of the cap that his contract eats up is going to decline. That's not really helpful for the Jets. Winnipeg, for one thing, has its own internal salary system and has some pretty clear cutoffs that they tend to like to stick by. And I don't think that a $9.5 million 30-year-old defender with another 6 years left is really that intriguing of a proposition. If you were to ask the Hawks to eat like 30%, then you're starting to talk about having to pay up for him. And I just don't really see why you would do that. At that point, you might as well just resign Neil Pionk. He's probably happy to be here, and you would probably be getting not too dissimilar production. And that's the thing, is like, I don't really think that's a plan the Jets should follow either. I love Neil. I think he's a great guy. I don't like the idea of paying him north of $6 million for multiple seasons. One of the last big long-term deals he has. He's only really worked alongside one pairing partner. And I think Jones has a similar profile in some ways to where I just struggle to really want to see it. Will Jones be better in some things like zone exits and stuff? Sure. Yeah, I can see that. Does that really make me want to shell out for him in a trade? No. And even if the Jets were being paid to take the salary on, it would basically suck up all the extra space the Jets have and force them to make some really tough decisions going forward. I think for what you'd have to give up and the opportunity cost of what it would take to make this deal happen, I continue to sit on the fence of not really liking this. Heck, I'd probably even go with Rasmus Ristolainen instead. And I'm not really a big Ristolainen fan. You've heard me talk about him before. You know that I view him as kind of like a third or middle pairing option, not a guy that I would particularly want to make a feature part of my offense, especially because with Ristolainen, his defensive value is primarily what you're getting. Offensively, he's not really adding much. So you'd better hope the defensive value that he has is really stout. And it's decent. I think that there is something to his game now, especially since Tortorella has maybe stripped out some of the chaos, but it's not at a level to where I'm like, I want to spend assets on that. Ristolainen will probably fetch a decent package. And again, I just look at the D market and I keep wondering if the Jets really should just sit this one out. There really aren't that many blue liners that are of interest. I can't really see many upgrades for the Jets. The guys that would be upgrades are not really being shopped right now. And so for the Jets, if you're going to go that route, it might be better to sit and wait for somebody to make the mistake first and then swoop in on a deal that nobody's looking for. I think, honestly, Coughlin might be a reasonable upgrade in our third pairing. He and Miller can split time, and Coughlin looked fine to me. I think I would like a third pairing upgrade on the left side, especially somebody who can do that. And Alexiak continues to me, at least, to be one of the more realistic options. I've heard Mario Ferraro's name around. Ferraro is a guy that I'd need to watch a little bit. With the Sharks defense being as bad as it is, I would want to see how he processes the game, what sort of passing outlets he uses, how he tries to skate with possession, to get a better sense of like what his fit would be in Winnipeg, because trying to figure it out just from his Sharks days, you're not going to get very much that's usable out of the footage and data that you're looking at, because San Jose is a bad team, and their defense is putrid, but it might not be the case for every player if they're moved to another system. So Ferraro, he's younger. He's not as expensive. I think the Jets have actually been linked to him at one point or maybe another point. So there may be something there to that, but I don't know. I just think the defender market this year is not that exciting. I'm not really jumping for joy at a lot of these options. Even with Alexiak, who I think would be the most preferable option, I'm kind of like, he's an upgrade. He's a guy who provides you some third pairing depth, but I don't get excited about it. So with a Jones trade, I'm even less enthused about it. There's just too much risk. And I think the Jets really shouldn't be looking at a cap going up as an opportunity to spend more on gambles like this. I think if you're swinging, look at the Petterssons out there. Look at the, I guess, Cousins of the world. Dylan Cousins, I don't know that I would really be doing that particular trade with Buffalo, but like, this is the kind of gamble I'm talking about. If you're going to gamble, go with like younger players with some legitimate upside, players who have interesting stats profiles, who have the skill to keep up and clearly have something. It's just that for whatever reason, their current team isn't making the most of it. And so maybe the Jets can benefit out of that. But Winnipeg usually doesn't take those shots either. So for me, I would say hard pass on the Jones deal. Curious to know how you feel about it. If Chicago paid us to take him on and also retain salary, would you do it? What would you want Chicago to be proffering up here? Let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Before we close out for tonight, did want to check in just for a brief moment because the Jets are going to be back in action this coming weekend, and some good news on the injury front as Adam Lowry is finally back practicing. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's closing thoughts as we're just wrapping up. Obviously, it's been an interesting couple of weeks for all of us hockey fans watching this Four Nations face-off. A lot of fun, a lot of craziness, and the NHL season's about to get back on track, right? A lot of us are probably excited for it. I know that it's maybe going to feel like a little bit of a letdown compared to the Four Nations face-off, but personally, I am actually looking forward to having the Jets back, especially because the season's almost here. Again, we have just around like 25, 30-ish games left in the season. I'm kind of ready to get towards the playoffs. I think my body is ready for that. I'm in the playoff mindset. And, for a lot of things, this is a nice return. The Four Nations vibes have been awesome. The enthusiasm is high, and it would be great if that energy can kind of transfer to the back portion of Winnipeg's season. They left the season on a huge streak, very happy vibes. They beat some good teams along the way. Now it's time to bear down and finish out the last of these couple of months before you get to April. And Adam Lowry coming back really couldn't have come at a better time. Wearing a normal practice jersey, is seemingly pretty hyped about, watching his teammates play for the USA and Canada. He is giving the edge to Canada. That's his current loyalty, even though he's got some split loyalties here. But for Lowry, great to see him back. For the Jets, I would really love to see where they plant him in the lineup. We're not really going to have a firm picture probably until this coming Monday, just because Saturday's game, Hellebuyck, Connor, and Morrissey will not be playing, so there will be some shakeups here with the lineups. I kind of wonder how Arneal's going to play this. Ehlers and Lowry looked like they were doing pretty well together. I don't know if Arneal is going to keep going with that. Maybe he puts Ehlers up with Scheifele and Velarde. If so, that's a great trio. Would love to see it a little more. This could be an excuse to give that trio some run time. And if they do well against the Blues, I kind of wonder if the Jets maybe think about, some stuff in the future with them. I don't really expect it to be more than just a game or two. Again, this is going to be a night off for a couple of guys. And for the Jets, they like Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde together. That trio has played more than any other line in the NHL, and so I don't really anticipate that an Ehlers, Scheifele, Velarde reunion really changes things. But we don't even know if that line is going to be back together yet, so we'll have to be patient and see what the line scrimmages and line skates look like. But I'm hopeful. It'd be cool. It's a nice little treat. I'm sure Arneal wants to see if they can be a group that's reliable, especially if things don't go that well in the first couple of games for the playoffs. You want to have that backup option in your back pocket and know that it's something you can summon. Lowry and Ehlers, though, I would think would probably start together unless he continues to run that the Perfetti, Nemesnikov, Ehlers trio. They've been good lately. I kind of still want to see Lowry there. I know that Nemesnikov has finally looked more like last year's Nemesnikov, but I think for the longer-term picture, seeing if Lowry can actually hang in the 2C role might be a little more helpful. Not that I think Nemesnikov hasn't really picked up his game lately, but it's just if you're trying to assess the trade market and figure out what the Jets specifically need, knowing if you have a 2C in Lowry already might be really, really beneficial, because then you can prioritize maybe bringing in a winger. Maybe it gives you the leeway to go chase a big defender. I'm not really sure what the Jets are going to be after at this deadline. I assume everything is the answer outside of a goalie. They're probably not after a goalie. But pretty much every other position is probably under at least some level of consideration. So for the Jets, this is a great opportunity. I would make the most of it. You've got multiple guys sitting. You have a chance to get Eric Comrie another win. And I'm sure Winnipeg will also be kind of looking at the Blues. St. Louis, has been discussed as a real big trade central at this point. They're going to start clearing out some salary. Yesterday's episode, I obviously talked about some blue stuff that I would be interested in. Kyrou, Thomas, guys like that. Parayko, probably on Winnipeg shortlist as well. I am a lot more hesitant on Parayko than I am Thomas or Kyrou for obvious reasons, but it wouldn't shock me if somehow at the end of all of this, Parayko is a Jet. My own reservations about that. You know how I feel about that, but it is what it is. Winnipeg will get some really good defensive support there, so it's not all bad. It's just, would you want to allocate that money in a slightly more offensively inclined position, right? It's, a balancing act. You want to make sure that you're not just getting purely shutdown guys because you need offense. This team at 5v5 needs scoring and offensive creativity. Not like loads of it, but enough to help move the needle come playoff time. So, it's going to be an interesting few weeks, but I'm just looking forward to having the season back. A first game against the Blues, a home game against the Sharks the following Monday. San Jose has been a lot tougher lately. They still lose a lot. They concede tons of goals, but they do score a fair bit. So it'll be interesting. Although now the Sharks don't have Gronlund, so maybe they're a little bit less scary. But for Winnipeg, I'm just glad the Jets are back. It feels like it's been an eternity since we have had a last Jets game. I guess February 7th is a pretty long ways to wait. It'll be, like 2 weeks coming this Saturday. So, yeah, go Jets go. Glad it's back. And we are almost to the home stretch, man. It is getting so close. I'm a little, hesitant about getting myself overly hyped about this team. And yet I find it very hard not to be. They have put themselves in a really good spot. They're first in the league, first in the Central. The President's Trophy feels very much within reach. I'm just curious to know what happens when you get to the playoffs. That's the last hurdle for the team, and pending what the great Chevy Graces do in the front office, maybe, just maybe, this feels like the year that Winnipeg goes real deep. I'm hoping and praying for that. It's been many years of disappointment and frustration. I think the fans are really ready for some change. I think the players want a deep run, and if the Jets can deliver that this season, that would just be, the icing on the cake. This year has already been very good as it is. My own criticisms or nagging about certain line combinations and stuff aside, this has been a really successful season, and I'd like to see the team rewarded for it. So let's hope the boys have one last big surprise and stay healthy over these last 25-ish or so games. We are in the home stretch. We are so close to April and spring. I'm really hoping that the Jets go deep so I have an excuse to go up to Winnipeg during the playoffs. Been many years since I was last there, and I would love to hang out, maybe run an event or something with some folks who are listeners and are also interested in maybe doing a watch party. We'll just have to play it by ear and see what happens. But, man, if it parlays all the way into a cup final, let me tell you, I will be there like you would not believe. It would be one of the most amazing times, and I think, Jets fans who have really watched this team kind of flounder for many years, they deserve something really cool. Also would help take the sting out of the Blue Bombers, constantly disappointing the last few years. Dropping multiple Grey Cup finals in a row hurts a lot. So let's have the Jets kind of pick up some slack, right? Let me know how you're feeling about all of this in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. But for tonight's show, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thank you for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.